All right, so I would like to discuss the motivations behind the fall 2016 habit sourcing research that I did on behalf of DTR and the Delta Lab. So the motivations for this quarter relate in part to the motivations from the habit sourcing paper that was submitted to UIST in Tokyo, but there are also some new motivations as well. So community sensing and citizen science projects are awesome for collecting data, but they're limited by the amount of people who will be willing to actually participate in these sorts of studies, because normally these people will be people who have like a stake in the data that's collected, or who are inherently interested in collecting data about a certain subject. An interesting example I saw was this system called eBird, in which birders were totally willing to track bird locations, bird types, etc., but a non-birder would not be interested at all. So that shows that willing users for many community sensing and citizen science projects are quite rare in these sorts of niche fields. So habit sourcing is a concept that has recently been created in the Delta Lab in order to address this problem. And what habit sourcing did was it attempted to gather data in the background about the user's environment as they engaged in a habit-building activity, such as running, as in Zombies Interactive, which I'll present shortly, and then also walking, meditative walking in Zen Walk. However, one limitation of habit sourcing, as it then stood, was that the data collected was low fidelity, as in it was just location and object type data, and the user's habit building experiences were not personalized or context aware. In fact, I remember reading in some of the previous habit sourcing design principles that at times people might be asked questions about fire hydrants, and they were in an area that had no fire hydrants at all. So this leads me to my research question, which is, how can we present the storyline for scaffolded interactions, aka interactions that build upon prior data and knowledge, in order to best engage users in customized habit-building experiences and simultaneously gather higher fidelity data about their environment? So I came up with 3 design arguments, but I nixed the first one because I was more interested in testing how physical interactions, or the physical action that the user performs, can best engage them in a habit-building practice and thus in data collection, and also in how the question was worded in order to collect more data. Because previously the question being asked was yes or no, is there an object there? But I wanted to gather more data about what type of object was there in the way that would be most facile for the user. So my first design argument is asking a this versus not this question will cause less user confusion and thus lead to more accurate data collection about a given object than a this versus that question. And to clarify this, I want to give an example. So the object that I opted to scaffold off of in my user study was trees. And what I wanted participants to be able to tell me was, is this tree coniferous or is this tree deciduous? And I came up with 2 ways of asking that question without directly asking it. So one way, the this versus not this way, was asking, is the tree triangle shaped or is it not triangle shaped? The other way was asking, does this tree have needles or does this tree have leaves, which is a good example of this versus that. The reason I thought that the triangle-shaped question would be less confusing is because I thought it would be easier for someone to say that an object doesn't have an attribute, rather than distinguishing between 2 objects that might be like hard to see, or it just might require a bit more time to think. So then the second design argument that I came up with and tested was I asked a user to perform a physical action, asking a user to perform a physical action that ties more directly to the storyline or that differs from prior physical actions will lead to higher user engagement. So basically what I wanted to vary here was the type of physical actions that the user performed in their environment. So essentially I picked 3 physical interactions to try out. sprinting, which was the same old that habit sourcing applications used previously, swerving away from an object. In Zombies Interactive, this might make sense because perhaps zombies might be hiding behind a tree, and of course you don't want to be sprinting past the tree. You want to be running and like swerving away from those zombies. Um, and then finally, zigzag running. So say zombies like are on your left and right and maybe you need to like dodge them. That was my goal with that physical interaction. And the reason the reason I pose this design argument is that I postulate that this is because an action tailored to the user's current environment and to their storyline will feel more personalized, and I feel like personalization will inspire and convince the user that they should actually go ahead and perform this action. Discuss the system and technology I built. So the user experience of Zombies Interactive is essentially split into 3 segments. Introduction, queued interactions, one scaffolded and one not, and then mission completed. As you can see in this diagram right here, which I can't zoom into unfortunately, but I have 3 variants of the app that I have created, and the variants are described in these bullet points over here. Essentially, I give each user a different physical action to perform in the scaffolded interaction, and I also queue them either at a tree that has pine needles or one that has triangular shape. So in terms of actual architecture, in order to implement scaffolding, what I had to do was I had to take advantage of this wonderful class in the Experience Kit API called Opportunity Poller. And what Opportunity Poller does is it pulls this object called the Scaffolded Manager, which holds a bunch of interactions that could be inserted into the storyline only if the conditions are right. So Opportunity Poller pulls certain conditions, seeing like if the desired object is in region, if it even exists, other things like that. And it polls for a given amount of time, and if the situation is right, it selects an opportunity from the Scaffolding Manager and inserts it into the Experience Manager, which, as I state here, encapsulates the overall Zombies Interactive user experience. So in order to implement scaffolding, in summary, I essentially took advantage of this object called Opportunity Poller. Okay, I'm going to show a sample walkthrough of Zombies Interactive. I am told that the world is in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. I'm basically briefed on the storyline. In this mission, you've been asked to collect intelligence about the area around you. I press got it, then I'm prompted to this screen on which I can press play in order to start my Zombies Interactive experience, and also I can play music during my run. I allow Zombies Interactive to access my location, motion and fitness activity, and then here Zombies Interactive has located me. Then I press start.
Runner 5. This is the Advanced Intel team at Able Township. Our job is to learn as much as possible about what's out there beyond the colony. You're the only runner whose device is still fully functioning, so we're going to have to ask you to do some recon work.
To discuss my study and its findings. So essentially my study had 3 components: a pre-survey, actually running using Zombies Interactive, and then a post-survey. And pre-survey questions kind of just ask people how engaged they felt during running. My participants felt not really engaged, not really disengaged with running. They all felt kind of mediocre about it. But their favorite aspect of running was stress relief, and common complaints were boredom and physical discomfort. As for running with Zombies Interactive, I had 3 users. Each user tested a version of Zombies Interactive. There were 3 versions that I mentioned earlier, and then I asked them immediately after they ran if they heard 1 or 2 cues. Everyone heard 2 cues, which meant that they heard both the non-scaffolded and scaffolded scaffolded interaction queue. So I had each of my participants fill out a written post survey that asked them their impressions of Zombies Interactive, about which queues they found most enjoyable, things like that. One user noted that he ran slightly faster while using Zombies Interactive because the storyline. And then another user really liked Zombies Interactive because it felt like it knew her geography, which I thought was very interesting wording for saying that it felt interactive and context aware. So in terms of the scaffolded interaction, some interesting points. The user who I had sprint in both the scaffolded and non-scaffolded interaction felt like very so-so about both of those interactions, like nothing seemed special to her, whereas the user that I had swerving away from the tree after she sprinted in the non-scaffolded interaction thought that the swerving away was the coolest thing ever because it fit very well into the storyline and it made sense to her to dodge zombies if she's running by a tree full of them. Both of those users heard the pine versus leaf cue, which they seemed to like, but the one user who heard the triangle-shaped versus not triangle-shaped tree cue really disliked how that was presented to him. He also found it highly unrealistic that if there were a real zombie apocalypse, he would be asked to do something in such a conditional format. He prefers more of like a commanding statement, as in do this rather than do this, or if not, do that. In terms of actual data collection, each user did respond to the scaffolded interaction, and according to this data table here, my app was able to get more information about the trees that they passed and that those trees were in fact conifer trees, which was quite exciting. So the results obtained in this study are exploratory at best, but I think they do inform my design arguments a bit further. And to me, my second design argument about what sorts of physical interactions really help engage a user in a scaffolded study, like I think that is what I would like to pursue further next quarter.